Okay, thank you. Eric, I just want, everybody should know Erik Weaver. If you don't, he's always on the cutting edge. He was in Hollywood when people just started talking about the cloud. And now he's been on the cutting edge right down in LA on the issue of LED and virtual production. So we're really glad to have him, a great panel. And Erik, take it away.
Thank you so much, Marty. Really appreciate it. Jay, we forgot videos. I didn't bring a video. Did you bring it?
Sorry, I'll email everyone personally a video after this. Do you want more bakery stuff, more LED stuff? I got them all.
So, anyway, so let's start off with the most eloquent of us all here on the stage. Noah, can you give us a description of on-set virtual production or ICVFX or?
Yeah, that's a tall order there. Most eloquent. First of all, just real quick poll: who has heard of this term virtual production before in the audience? Okay, great. So fair number. Who's heard of this stuff that we're doing with LED volumes? Okay, so the shot that was in there that was the guy kind of out in what appeared to be the desert that then switched to the studio, that's kind of in-camera visual effects virtual production, which is one of many flavors of virtual production, but the one that's getting a lot of heat now because we're able to do visual effects instead of green screen and put them in later, we do them live in the camera. So that's what's got a lot of people really excited right now, I would say.
Excellent, thanks. So we don't have a lot of time here today, so we'll try to stay a little more practical on this side. And let's open it up for, if you're setting up for a shoot like this, what are the things that you need to prep for, the questions you need to ask? Jay, you've done a little bit of work up here.
A shoot like what, I guess, is the question, right? Because there's all this different fracturing between, like, are you doing more cinematic virtual production, XR, multi-camera broadcast, corporate delivery. But the biggest questions are always, what are you trying to achieve? Who is your team? And how much time do you have to prepare for it? Because all of those buckets end up filling differently depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, too, that the way that we usually approach virtual production shoots is as if they're location shoots. So as opposed to having a mentality where you're going to like address it again or fix it in post sort of deal, whatever you can do ahead of time to prepare for the actual shoot day, even though it is a virtual world that you're in, you'll find that there's a lot of savings and things that you gain by thinking about it in that sort of mentality. I mean, the game engine levels are a perfect example of it. Like, you can go into an Unreal game level and touch every rock or every muffin or everything, just like you could in real life. There's always a question of, should you on the production day when you're like at take 30 about something? So like, yeah, treating it kind of like a live event in a lot of ways is helpful.
Yeah, and just being aware that like the tech stack is actually fairly standardized, but your application of it can shift these timelines aggressively, right? If you have a strong post facility, the necessity for everything to be perfect on set shifts dramatically. But if you need to get it all in camera on tape and leave that day for delivery, your needs are entirely different from an optimization standpoint, from a look dev standpoint, and from your team size standpoint as well.
So actually, can someone make comments on kind of the different flavors here, between a played 2, 2.5D, 3D, kind of defined these different aspects? Koina, do you want to take a hack at least some of it?
Well, actually, first of all, thank you. It is so exciting to be in a room with so many smart problem solvers. Thank you to Martin, Alicia, and SVG. So I come from a little bit, I have one small part in virtual production, which is visualization. And that's where we take a step back and we sort of plan what we're going to do. When I started in this industry, I started as an Imagineering apprentice for Disney in live entertainment. And we would build and design our sets on a piece of paper and build little models with popsicle sticks and Barbie dolls and, a lot like when you're a kid building Legos and such. And, and there was that set would sit there and collect dust as you move through the process of, designing and developing a project. Now we're at such an exciting stage where the planned document becomes the production document, and then can converge and move into a metaverse or move into other in-screens or second screen entertainment. That's part of what makes this so exciting. So when I come in on a project, I work with a filmmaker or the team to sort of design the project and get it ready for a Noah and for Jay and for a Zach, and helping you to sort of manage and visualize what the project is going to be and how you're going to save money, where you can cut a corner, where you need a real rock versus a fake muffin. And
Yeah, no, actually, it's interesting you brought up the sort of the talk about like the Barbie dolls and like sort of like the physical sets, because like that gets into a general discussion with virtual production about whether you're kind of in a 2D, a 2.5D, or a 3D world. So like the two extremes are kind of easy to visualize. The 2D is this, right? Projection, it's a plate. The content that's being delivered is going to be a still or a video of some sort, right? 3D is then what you've seen in stuff like The Mandalorian, where it's a full game engine, immersive environment. Your point of view from the camera is essentially you're a player in the level. So whenever you move something, everything is 3D. You can walk around the back of everything. You can look at it. I mean, whether the asset's been finished or not is a different discussion, but that's generally the sort of concept. 2.5D gets into sort of this interesting blend between the two, where it's almost like, think of theater flats or scrims, right? Where you have your different scrim lines where you can bring stuff in. And what you can actually do is by pairing camera tracking with those 2D plates, you can sort of create a parallax movement as the camera moves. So you're actually watching what is effectively a couple layers of 2D plates move to sort of mimic a 3D environment. The trick is you get too off axis, you'll realize everything is really just 2D, but it helps get into an in-between place. And the reason you're sort of doing that is it gets back to that creative ask, is like you're trying to manage, if you can understand where you want to get creatively, you can design the solution to that. And I think with the challenge that I know that we've all faced on particular shows is that pandemic sort of fast forwarded a development process in about 6 months that on like my personal time cycle in terms of like techniques that we've been using used to happen like on a 4-year cycle. So a lot of buzzwords and concepts sort of went from 0 to 100% very quickly. And so the amount of times someone like said, I want that, and points to either a YouTube or a clip of something, and you go, cool, do you have a $40 million budget and 8 months of prep? And they go, no, it's gonna like happen in a week, and I've got $200,000. And you go, okay. And you don't wanna say no, but like we need to then manage, well, what's the creative, like why did that excite you? Like what were you going towards?
So I definitely want to get into managing expectations, but
Yeah.
But I think that Koina, you talked about visualization. Perhaps, Noah, you could break down some of the two key concepts of previs or tech viz or some of those kind of vises so that the audience understands what the difference is.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to planning, and we have really amazing tools that can visualize stuff in a very non-abstract way, so it's a lot easier for people who may not be super technical or super, coming from the VFX side to look at something and be able to evaluate it creatively. So all of these are like visualization types or vises. So we've got previs, which is what you're doing as you're kind of planning from the beginning. Tech viz, where you're kind of deciding, looking at the physical characteristics of cameras and dollies and sets and stages and kind of seeing how they would actually physically interact. Stunt viz, this was used all over the place in the movie Fury Road, where they did all kinds of using physical simulations of game engines to be able to see how people falling off trucks or jumping onto them or blowing up would kind of function. We have post-viz, which happens after the production, where we kind of continue to look at ways that we can add more virtual elements into completed shots. So all these things kind of go together. Another viz that isn't even a viz is simulcam, where looking through the camera, the viewfinder, the monitor, we superimpose virtual elements so you can kind of see how the dragon that's not really there in Game of Thrones, or the Na'vi who aren't completely there in Avatar, how they're interacting, and so the camera person can frame them up. It's just ways that we all kind of are able to get on the same page, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and in many ways, I mean, what we're trying to do is really just blend the real world and the virtual world as quickly and as accurately as possible. And if your system and your planning and all of the communication has gone properly, I mean, I still remember the first day that we had a previous camera in the Unreal scene, and then we had the real camera, and I saw the real camera approaching the previous camera to get set up for the shot, and then they locked together, and it was the previous shot. And like, that is a magical moment, because that means that you can expand to almost anything as long as you can utilize, as long as you have an alignment between these two worlds.
All right, so let's go back to the managing expectations, because I've definitely been involved or dragged into projects where wasn't quite there. Any fun stories from the group or advice on this side? Jay, I think that you've been in this situation.
It happens all the time, right? You have to know what you're, for instance, that we were working on a feature, right, where everything had to be so right that we ended up doing a plate workflow, a 2D workflow. We ended up doing a 2.5D workflow for specific shots, and then recreating those plates in a 3D world. And that's what it took to really get this all right. And that expectation was there from the start. It was budgeted for from the monetary perspective and also the time perspective. What happens is that if you can make that look effortless, then sometimes you don't have time. Sometimes you don't have budget, but they are asking for the exact same deliverable. And that's where you really run into issues, right? We can sell all day an F1 car, but like at the end of the day, sometimes you just need like a Toyota Camry to just kind of like get you from A to B safely, especially if you don't have the people that can drive it.
Well,
Actually, I was going to ask you, is everything Mandalorian? Is everything
Absolutely
giant
not.
stages?
it is absolutely not. Well, no, and it's
He
just
worked
kind
on that show.
It's kind of funny too. Is like even with something like that, you know, if you've seen any of the backstage footage of that, I mean, it's a phenomenal technical achievement and it's a huge volume. But like people forget that the part of the reason that volume's so big is because their main character has a mirror ball for a head. Right? Like he's reflecting from every different direction. So like, I mean, that wasn't the only reason why it was that big. There was a lot of other stuff that went into it, but like, it's little things like that where it's like, wow, well, if your character isn't literally made of mirrors, then you can maybe scale everything down a bit because you can control like what you're doing. And so it gets really back to that initial conversation in the previs, because if you can set up that communication from jump, then like this entire tool set is tuned to get people on the same page, right? It's not like you're kind of having, again, it's that mind switch. You're switching from a post mindset where you're like, you're gonna give me a finished product, I'm gonna give you notes, and then you're gonna do it again, right? Because that's essentially what that process is. This is, no, we're never gonna do it again once it's done, so we're gonna talk it through all the way up to that point so that if there is stuff that has to happen in post, and there always is, it's not like a silver bullet by any means, but like you've already kind of come to all those agreements. And it is a real, you know, mindset shift in a lot of ways. You can't, with this stuff is like, there is flexibility, but you can't approach it and just say like, I'm gonna capture everything in every direction and then maybe we'll see where we can get something. There is a bit of, you have to put that investment ahead of time. But I think that in my view, that type of thinking gives you better product. You know, if you kind of know what you want before you do it, but you know, that's it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It just kind of really depends.
Sometimes the YouTube video only worked long enough to take that video and then completely broke, and we can't do it again.
I've definitely been there back in the day where whole panels didn't turn on. So having that time to prep and make sure all the engineering aspects.
I've been in live broadcast shows where I was watching the array fail. And it was just a thing going like, well, I hope we make it to commercial before this whole thing just completely dumps. But
So I think that's another thing in planning. Building a stage for live broadcast or events like that versus film and media. How do those really vary? Because I mean, like if you go visit somebody like JT Rooney's XR stage versus the Mandalorian or Amazon stage, maybe you guys could talk a little bit more. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I have a stage in my living room that's 9 feet tall by 12 feet wide. And yeah, I couldn't shoot an episode of The Mandalorian, but I could certainly capture a close-up from that show if I wanted to. And I could cut it right into the show and you'd never know. So, I mean, that's what impresses me, I think, the most about this is, yeah, you've got these awesome stages that are truly massive, that are worth many millions of dollars. But you could also build something very similar in a far more modest setup and do really cool stuff with it, scaled way down for considerably less.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too about different markets have different emphases on what they're focused on. So like film, right? Because you have this giant post period, you get really obsessive about specific moments in time, and you can spend days on a moment, right? Like you are considered moving fast in like a feature if you are filming a script a day, which is a minute of screen time, right? Like you're averaging 1 or 2 of those versus, you know, a live broadcast where you've done the entire show in 1 3-hour, you know, period of time, which could be like hundreds of pages of script. So like it's really identifying like what you're sort of moving towards at the end of the day. And and if you have an idea of kind of the context that you're in, it makes it easier to sort of engineer a system that feeds into that. Yeah.
And you have to plan for growth as well. I mean, the upgrade timelines on all these components are so different, right? There are stable things, right? Your network architecture and topology, right? That's 3 to 5 years. Your GPUs, 1 year, right? Tracking, I don't know, every 6 months when a better one comes out. Software, give me a demo, I'll try it out. But you want to make sure that the concrete stuff is really well engineered, and really invest in that and your people, because a lot of the other stuff just shifts just so dramatically from year to year. And you don't want to be caught in the wrong kind of overall modality, because you need to have the ability to expand into it.
Yeah, and there's a concept that we always talk about at Lux, that's the show within the show. So there is the product that you're going to put out to the masses, right? That's what the client and you are working together to produce. But then there's also how you conduct yourself during the production, right? And there is a second show that's happening then. And that second show, like I may be shooting something that's going to go to edit and post, but on the day, I'm essentially conducting a live event for my client. And so because of that, we're building in redundancies and things like that. And it's not like smoke and mirrors. We're not trying to fool anyone into like, oh, everything's fine. There's like a fire happening in the background by the servers. But like what you don't want to do is, it's like the little stuff. It's like, you know, I know that when the system reboots, it's going to go to Windows screen over this like 80-foot, you know, LED wall. So what I always make sure I do is I'm going to make sure I go to my switcher and go to black, or I put up a still frame for the only reason just to hide the fact that I'm going to a desktop. And I'm not, again, not trying to fool anyone to thinking that's what's happening. What I'm trying to make sure is that the producer who just walks in, who wants to show a colleague something cool, doesn't see what appears to be a giant error happening on the screen. You know, and just being cognizant of how that dialogue goes in addition to, you know, actually executing the product.
So I'd actually kind of like to come back to Jay's comment about talent. And beyond visualization, Koina, you're focused very much on educating the next group of people. And this is a real challenge for us. I mean, I like to compare on-set virtual production to the difference between you making a really nice Italian meal that you bought supplies from Vaughn's versus locally sourced French cooking. There's some absolute complexities in this that can look really bad or completely fail if you're not careful. So Koina, do you want to talk about some of your efforts around education? And
Thank you. So I guess we're always educating, especially when we're on a set. We're always problem solving. We're always fixing things. So so I also teach virtual production at Laney College, and I've authored the first virtual production certificate authorized by the state of California, as well as the first XR certificate. And so the challenge that we have in attracting folks, because there are many people that want to do this, they see a Mandalorian and they want to do it. But access to the equipment, access to being able to, my students don't have NVIDIA graphics cards, so those are some of the challenges that we face. But we are tackling it as best that we can. But education is also, I just spent the past 2.5 months on a set with an A-list director prevising his next feature film. Didn't know anything about the engine, the Unreal Engine, about virtual production, and so I'm educating and training an A-list director step by step in how to do this. One of the other projects I work on is with a national retailer that has. They've made commercials and promotionals of different products in homes. So let's say they build a set of a living room or a kitchen, and now they want to migrate to a virtual set, because I think that's kind of part of the topic. And so how do you take, an art director and a team that's used to building and constructing a set, and then say, now we're going to go and do this virtually. And now we're going to, take that whole set, we're going to light it, and we're going to build it into a 3D world, and we're going to set up the cameras. So we're always training and educating. If we can get this next generation early enough, and introduce them to 3D tools and technology, so they understand how to operate in a 3D world, and get them access to just some tools, not all the tools, we can really grow this industry. Because as the gentleman on this stage will tell you, if we don't have the talent, skills, because it's not just about, I want to be a superstar. It's about, do I know the XYZ axes? Do I know how to light? Do I know how to wrap a 3D object? Do I know how to light a scene? And where is an over-the-shoulder shot, right? How do I do this? We don't have an industry. Please.
And this is definitely multiple educations, from engineering to gaming to cinema language. Noah, you've done some absolutely amazing work with ASC and LinkedIn, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I have a course on LinkedIn that gives a nice intro to this. I wrote a couple books for Epic Games. But one thing I wanted to just kind of dovetail there is that what's great about the next generation coming up is this is game engine technology. So any kid who is really good at playing PlayStation right now, or say Fortnite on a PC, they already know this stuff. They just don't realize it. But it's like they waxed on, waxed off for days, so they're ready to go.
And it's like a light turning on. You really have to give them time on stage. Almost every DP or director, I'll tell you what, the first week or first project, they're terrified. They're mitigating against the wall. They're not. It's unnatural for them, and they have to have that experience. But could you tell just a little bit more about your LinkedIn stuff?
Oh, okay. All right, more plugs. So I did this class that you can get on LinkedIn Learning right now. There's a 30-day free trial, so you don't even have to pay for it. And I already got paid, so you're taking away nothing from me, so it's wonderful. But it basically, I do a very kind of across-the-board introduction as to how this stuff works, how you might want to construct a stage of your own on a very modest level, what you could do with it, why you would do it, what advantages it has over more traditional visual effects workflows where you're doing compositing and post-production, that sort of thing. And I think it's great because it's a good way to kind of open up people's eyes to the possibilities, because you see something like The Mandalorian, and as awesome as it is, it may seem like, oh, that doesn't really apply. I'm doing corporate videos in a closet, so this doesn't really matter to me. Like, well, you could get like an 80-inch OLED TV at Best Buy, and that could be your wall, really. I mean, you could do close-ups of a person sitting at a desk with that and go from, a kind of cruddy, like, brick wall backdrop to the Taj Mahal overnight. I mean, that's what you can do with this stuff. So there really is the education side, in my opinion, is a lot of just opening up people's minds to the possibilities, and then their excitement, we'll take it from there, because this stuff is a lot of fun to play with.
I was just going to say, like, especially for corporate video, this stuff is absolutely incredible. I think it's a really good use case for it. And just to dovetail onto the dovetail of who do you train, right? Who do you hire? Who do you invest in? I don't have a very good answer for that. I'm an AV technician. I should be behind that tech drape. And by the way, fantastic work up here. I don't know why I'm up here half the time, right? We've also hired people from game development, right? Went to school for game development. We're building Unreal Worlds. Well, if you put them on a set for 20 hours and they get yelled at all day, they don't stick around for too long. Broadcast folks, right? Broadcast folks, I worked in broadcast a fair amount. Broadcast folks view cameras entirely different than cinema folks. It's a whole different era of diplomacy, right? And I think the best thing is you just got to hire people that want to learn and that are willing to work and just have, it's the same as it's always been. You have to build it around the people and the team and then see where you can kind of go from there.
The quadruple dovetail I'll add to the end of that is that at the end of the day, even though it's called virtual production, and virtual production has been around for a while, what is currently virtual production is at best 2 or 3 years old. There's been development kind of in the background, but anyone who tells you that this stuff is all figured out and these are the 6 positions you need to have and those are the positions only you need to have, they are lying or they are holding secrets that I want. So, no, but the thing is, it's you really need to find people who are adaptable, who are sitting there going oh, this is like that other thing I did, but with this twist to it. And the type of people who can kind of make those leaps and do that type of thing, those are the most valuable people to hold on to. Because what it is right now is going to be a variation of the theme in the coming years, but this is not there's 30 years of cinematic language or production language around this stuff yet. Half the positions we hire for, I think I made up the name 2 weeks before. It was yeah, sure, this is a thing we're doing. And there's thought that goes into it. We're not just making random guesses at stuff, but this is still a science experiment to a certain extent. And if you can manage those expectations and manage your scale, there's a lot here that is actually really usable and very useful. But
it's a lot like digital cinema 1.0, which was roughly a 1.3 camera sensor, right? Early on, that wasn't perfect and completely right, and they were figuring it out. But look at what we have in camera sensors now. All right, we only have a little bit more time on a lightning round. Favorite job or most challenging project? Just real quick. Jay, start.
The ones I'm working on right now, of course.
Is your client in the audience?
Maybe.
No.
Nice. I get to shoot short films with students at NYU where they basically come up with an environment and I get to act them out while they're in a Zoom call, and that's pretty fun. I've gotten to be a space cowboy, cancer patient going to heaven, guy jumping off a cliff, you name it. So it's a lot of fun.
I enjoy really working with the creative team and between the bridge between the creative team and the technical team, because that's really where Previs kind of sits. So working with the director and helping him visualize his shots, helping him, where does this character stand, his blocking, his virtual camera work, and and having to reanimate a character because on the fly the director says, the character should be doing this at this moment, and so you've got on the fly, put on some mocap and put it all together. So it's that right there in the middle of that creative nexus and helping them to understand, no, you can't put a jib inside of a moving ambulance, so that shot's not going to actually work. So let's do a little bit of tech viz around that.
I'll be quick. My favorite show is the one I have yet to do for someone in this audience. Anyone.
Nice.
My contact information is available online. We would be happy to put together a quote for you. Thank you.
I actually think we're over time. So I worked on a project called Fathead. We're going to release a paper here soon, so you can take a look at that. Also, The Ripple Effect has a 150-page paper on how to do this
Yeah,
stuff.
it's some phenomenal work. You should really check that stuff out. It did a
Thank
great
you.
job.